Business value adding steps are those that are not value adding vis-a-vis of the customer, but nonetheless they are necessary or useful for the business to operate. You can use 3 criteria to say that a step is business value adding. Is the step required in order to collect revenue for the company, or is it necessary to improve or to grow the business, in particular to improve the revenue? Will the business potentially suffer in the long term if this step was removed? Or does this step reduce the risk of business losses now or in the future? In some cases, an activity or a step is business value adding if it is required in order for the business to comply to regulatory requirements. In other words, it is not necessarily useful for the business to operate, but it is necessary because it is dictated by imperatives the business has to abide with too. Let me go through some examples. Let me imagine I have a typical order to cash process. I receive a purchase order. Someone first opens the purchase order and checks it. Checking the purchase order is not necessarily something the customer is willing to pay for. As far as they are concerned, the purchase order is correct, otherwise they wouldn't have sent it. But checking the purchase order is necessary in order to ensure the smooth operation of the business, and that later on we don't find problems when it is too late or too expensive to fix them. As part of checking a purchase order, I might check the credit worthiness of the customer to ensure I am not providing a credit to a customer that might not pay me later for the products I have shipped. This step is also not a step the customer will be paying for. As far as the customer is concerned, they are worthy of credit. But it's something I need to perform, because if I don't, I might be having business losses down the track. Issuing an invoice is another example of a value-adding step. If I don't do it, I don't collect revenue. Or collecting the payment, or at the end of the process, collecting customer feedback is also a business value-adding step, because if I don't collect feedback, I don't have a basis later for improving my process. Let me take as a second example a university admission process where I receive applications for admission to a university degree. When application is received, a clerk, for example, verifies the completeness of the application or checks the validity of the degrees and their equivalence with respect to the system used by the university in question. Or they check the validity of the language test results that are submitted together with an application. These are all examples of business value adding steps, because from the customer's perspective, doing all these checks are not necessary. As far as they are concerned, they are worth of being admitted, but they are necessary from the university perspective in order to comply with certain regulations, in order to comply with their own internal policies, which on the end ensure the quality and the sustainability of the organization. We can see a pattern that activities that involve checks, verifications, are generally business value adding steps, and this will be a hook we will be using when we actually apply these type of techniques in practice.